Okay, this lesson is about how to write a level 1 essay paragraph, specifically in relation to sad joke onomatopoeia, but the structure can be used for any poem or any book or any film. So any text that you're going to write an essay on, this will be helpful because this is the paragraph structure that we use at Onslow College for you to write your essays in. So you're going to need 3 things with this video. You're going to need a set of highlighters or coloured pencils or felt pens or whatever. You're going to need the exemplar paragraph, which I have in paper and is also on OneNote, and the paragraph planner, which I have in paper and is also on OneNote. So you need those things in front of you before we get started. So this is what I'm going to cover in this recording. I'm going to explain what an essay is and why you need to write them. We're going to look at what we call the SEXC structure. We're going to look at an example paragraph, and then I'm going to introduce you to what you'll be doing for the coming lessons. So what is an essay specifically? What is it? So an essay in English is an argument that you form about a text using evidence to prove yourself right. So it's not a plot summary, it's not a character discussion, it's an argument about the text. And you respond to essay questions which give you a topic to write on. So for example, something that can come up in an exam is describe and explain how language is used to portray a message in the written text. Okay? So that's an example of an essay question. And when you go into the exam, you will have about 10 essay questions to choose from. So really choosing the topic that you'll be writing about. But no matter what the question is, for your written text exam, you'll be writing on the poems or the novel that we'll study later on. So in your English exam, you will write 2 essays. You have 3 hours to write 2 essays. One will be on the poetry or the novel that we're going to study, and that's the written text exam. And one will be on the film that we study, and that's the visual text exam. So 2 essays in 3 hours. But why essays? So why does NCEA English require you to write essays for your exam? Well, an essay is the best way to show that you can do the following things. To identify an idea or a theme or a message, because we know all those 3 words mean the same thing. So identify that in a text. Find evidence from the text for that idea, so be able to say, okay, this is where I see that idea in this poem or in this novel or in this film. Analyze that evidence, so break it down, that what, how, why process, what is the language doing? And explaining the purpose behind the text. So saying this is what the poem is doing, this is what we learn from it, this is how it makes us feel. And by doing those things in an essay, you show an understanding of literature and how it's constructed and what it's for. And the more depth you show in that understanding of the literature, the better your grade is. So if your understanding shows real insight and perception, that's an excellence. So what does a whole essay look like specifically? Well, this is how it looks when it's laid out. So you have an introduction, you have 3 paragraphs, and you have a conclusion. And as you can see there's some word counts, generally around 250 words for a paragraph, but that can vary. But that's generally the expected length of a full essay. So that's what it looks like when it's laid out like that. So like I said, you'll be writing 2 essays in 3 hours in your end of year exam. So I keep talking about the SEXC thing. So what is it exactly? Well, SEXC is an acronym for the structure for essay paragraphs that I'm going to teach you. And it looks like this. So SEXC. S stands for statement, E is explanation, X is example, and C is comment. Now in this video I'm going to explain to you what each of those terms mean and give you examples of those, but that's the way a paragraph is structured. So if we go back to the structure of an essay, you have an introduction, you have 1 SEXC paragraph, 2 SEXC paragraphs, 3 SEXC paragraphs, and the conclusion. So a SEXC paragraph is not an essay, it's one part that makes up an essay in full. So let's get started. What is the SEXC thing? What is it made up of? So S stands for statement. Now the statement is the very first line of a paragraph. It's the first sentence. And it's a judgment statement about a text. So how we've been practicing writing judgment statements, that's your first line of a paragraph. So for example, Apirana Taylor's Sad Joke on a Marae helps me to think about the important message that cultural dislocation causes people to lose their connection with their heritage. So I've got my key idea in there. I'm going to focus on cultural dislocation in this paragraph for this poem. And what I'm going to be discussing is the way dislocation causes people to lose connection with their culture, with their heritage, and with their history. So that's all I need. 1 sentence, a judgment statement, the first line of a paragraph. So then we move on to E in SEXC, which stands for explanation. So the explanation is 1 sentence or more, but 1 is fine, explaining the poem and your judgment statement in a little more detail. So just expanding and giving some context. So for example, leading on from that last example that I gave, the cultural dislocation judgment statement, the speaker of the poem, too, has returned to his marae after being culturally dislocated due to the urbanisation of Māori in New Zealand. So you can see 1 sentence explaining the context of the poem and the link to cultural dislocation in the text. So I'm explaining how we see dislocation just very briefly, so my judgment statement makes sense to the person who's reading my essay. Now, X stands for example. Now, that's pretty self-explanatory. You provide a quote from the text and state what language is being used. So what language technique? Is it a simile, a metaphor, repetition? And the quote that you choose should prove your statement. So it should make sense in the context that you're talking about. So if I'm talking about cultural dislocation in Sad Joke on a Marae and disconnection from heritage, my quote should help me prove that that is true. So after you've given your quote, you follow the what, how, why formula to unpack that quote to explain how it proves your statement. So for example, leading on from my judgment statement I've given as an example, I'm going to use this quote. My name is Tu, the freezing worker. Ngāti DB is my tribe. The pub is my marae. My fist is my taiaha. Jail is my home. And I've labelled that as an inverted mihi. That's the language technique. And then I've got my what is it showing? It shows the Māori people's struggle to replace what they have lost from their culture. How is it showing it? The mihi being in the wrong order, first of all. And then the DB, pub, fist, and jail are all aspects of the Pākehā world, that should say world, that were introduced to the Māori world. So that's the how it creates that meaning. And then why is that important? Well, it shows how Tu has attempted to regain parts of his lost identity through the Pākehā world because he's been disconnected from his own world, from the Māori world. And this is old news to you now. You give the quote, you label the technique, you unpack it. What is it doing? How is it doing it? Why is it doing it? So you know how to do that. So that's the X in SEXC, the example. And finally, C stands for comment. So this is where you explain the relevance of the poem and what we learn from it. So you're commenting on the relevance of the poem to us as readers. And this is where the author's purpose and reader response comes in. So the comment part of the paragraph is your author's purpose and reader response. And it needs to be related to your statement and your example. So it needs to flow on from that. It needs to make sense together. And that will make sense when I go through the main example with you. But just for example here, leading on from my previous examples that I've given, here's my author's purpose. Taylor's communication of this important message in this poem is a powerful expression of the impact of European culture on New Zealand Māori. The domination of white culture has pushed the likes of Tu further and further from their heritage to the point that they have lost connection with their ancestral roots. This has then led to Māori searching for these connections within the Pākehā world, causing further cultural dislocation. So I'm explaining what Taylor is trying to do, what he's trying to show us with this poem. And then I have my reader response. Taylor challenges his reader to see that the way modern European values have left many Māori feeling culturally disconnected and ignorant of their own heritage because they no longer understand it or feel they belong to it. So that's me explaining what we take from this author's purpose. So this is what Taylor's trying to do. So what do we understand? What are we supposed to learn from it? What are we supposed to take from it now that we've read it? So author's purpose and reader response make up your comment section. Now this is where your coloured pens or pencils or highlighters are going to come in handy. So you can see I've laid out each part of SEXC. So S for statement, E for explanation, X for example, and C for comment. And I've also laid out explaining what that means. So your statement is your judgment statement. The explanation is explaining that judgment statement. Your example is the quote, technique, and the what, how, why. And the comment is the author's purpose and reader response. So what you need to do is write those down or type those up and color code them in 4 different colors because you're going to need those colors for the activity on the next slide. So make sure that you write those, pause the video, write those down in 4 different colors. So we're going to look at an example paragraph which has been broken down into the different sections of SEXC. Now it's going to look it's a bit of a shock because it's a lot of words, but I'm going to explain it. So this is what one SEXC paragraph looks like. And it does look like a lot of writing because it is a lot of writing. It is a lot of information. So in red, up the top, that is the S, the statement. Then in blue, the explanation. In green is my example. And in pink is my comment. So let's read through it. So my statement. Apirana Taylor's sad joke on a marae helps me to think about the important message that cultural dislocation causes people to lose their connection with their heritage. My explanation. The speaker of the poem, Tu, has returned to his marae after being culturally dislocated due to the urbanisation of Māori in New Zealand. My example. Taylor uses an inverted mihi. My name is Tu the freezing worker. Ngāti DB is my tribe, the pub is my marae, my fist is my taiaha, jail is my home. The use of this mihi shows the Māori people's struggle to replace what they have lost from their culture. This is not only shown by the mihi being in the wrong order from tradition, which illustrates Tu's lack of knowledge about his culture, but also by the objects he uses to define himself. DB, pub, fist, and jail are all aspects of the Pākehā world that were introduced to the Māori world. This indicates how Tu has attempted to regain parts of his lost identity through the Pākehā world because he has been disconnected from the Māori world. And my comment. Taylor's communication of this important message in this poem is a powerful expression of the impact of European culture on New Zealand Māori. The domination of white culture has pushed the likes of Tu further and further from their heritage to the point that they have lost connection with their ancestral roots. This has then led to Māori searching for these connections within the Pākehā world, causing further cultural dislocation. Taylor challenges his readers to see that the way that modern European values have left many Māori feeling culturally disconnected and ignorant of their own heritage because they no longer understand it or feel they belong to it. So that's one full sexy paragraph. And remember, a full essay has 3 sexy paragraphs. So 3 separate ideas about a particular poem. But you don't need to worry about writing a full essay yet. Which brings me on to your task. You need to write 2 sexy paragraphs. So 1 for Sad Joke on a Marae and 1 for A Negro Speaks of Rivers. So totally separate 2 sexy paragraphs. You need to use the same idea for both paragraphs. So that means you either write about cultural identity for both poems or cultural dislocation for both poems. So you need to choose the one that you feel like you can talk about more. You will have all 4 lessons next week from the time this video was recorded. So this is Thursday, week 7. So you're going to have 4 lessons next week to plan and write your 2 sexy paragraphs. You can handwrite them or you can type them. That's totally up to you. It doesn't matter, whatever is easier. And you're going to need to complete the planner before you start writing. So I have A4 copies of the paper planners, or they are in OneNote as well. Now, the planner is designed to help you sift through all the information you have about all the poems and chunk it down and just pick the right parts that you want to use. And then instead of looking at all your notes trying to write a paragraph, you can just look at what you've planned to do. So it's incredibly important that you do the planner first. And your 2 paragraphs completed are going to be due on Friday the 23rd of March in spell 4. So that's Friday of week 8. That's our last lesson for that week. Okay? So you need to have your 2 paragraphs handed to me. If you're typing them, they just need to be emailed to me or on your OneNote, but they need to be finished by that Friday. Now with your planners, I recommend that you show me your plans before you start writing the paragraphs so you can make sure that you're on the right track. The 2 plans for both paragraphs should only take you 1 lesson maximum. So the next 3 can be focused on writing your paragraph specifically. So good luck, and I look forward to reading your work.